Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first video of So You Want to Conduct an Oral History Interview. My name is Gene Hardy, and I am an assistant professor at Michigan State University. I'm going to be your guide for these videos. The goal of this video series is to familiarize you with oral histories and prepare you to conduct them for yourself. In this first video, I will be answering the question, what is oral history? There are 4 videos in this series, including video 1, this one, what is an oral history? Video 2, components of an oral history interview. Video 3, preparing for an oral history interview. And video 4, conducting an oral history interview. If you are using the Benzonia Public Library's equipment available for checkout, there is a complimentary video by photographer and videographer Jeff Smith on our YouTube channel that also walks you through how to use that equipment to record oral histories. But coming back to this video, what is an oral history? I have 2 main objectives for you to learn from this video. First off, you will learn what an oral history is, especially what the goals of an oral history are and how oral histories are made. Second, you will learn why oral histories are important tools for understanding and preserving the historical record. Some of you might think that you already know what oral histories are, but I encourage you to watch this short video anyway. I bet you'll learn something you didn't already know. So what is an oral history? I like this definition from the Oral History Association, which is a not-for-profit membership organization for people and institutions, such as universities and libraries, that are committed to the value and practice of oral history. Their definition states that, quote, oral history is a field of study and a method of gathering, preserving, and interpreting voices and memories of people, communities, and participants in past events. They also say that oral histories are the oldest type of historical inquiry. They predate the written word, and that modern ones, starting with tape recorders in the 1940s, are now being practiced digitally. So let's unpack their definition a little bit. First, they say that oral history is a method of gathering, preserving, and interpreting. This means that oral history is not just about conducting the oral history for the sake of conducting the oral history. Its purpose is to actively preserve that history in an accessible format and also put it in a place where the history can be interpreted for others to understand. Second, oral history involves the voices and memories of people, communities, and participants in past events. This means that oral histories need to be captured using the voices of the people who experienced or are passing down the history that you're interested in recording. Further, oral histories don't only focus on individuals, but want to center and contextualize people in their communities. Returning to the original question, what is oral history? Oral history began as a way to pass down histories among cultures that didn't have a written language. In one way or another, all histories were oral histories until the creation of written language. And the majority of histories were actually still oral histories until the very recent past. In our context, oral history is a method for preserving certain histories through an interview. Oral history is a term used to mean both the method of recording the history as well as the end result or the recording itself. In other words, oral history is a term used for the process of conducting the oral history, what you are interested in doing, as well as the term used to identify the product that is created, the recording, the transcript, the end result, etc. So what are the goals of oral history? Oral histories are the result of a conscious intention of 2 or more people to create a permanent record that helps contribute to an understanding of the past as lived by the person speaking. There are 2 important terms here: conscious intention and permanent record. Conscious intention means that the intent is to create an oral history. In other words, oral histories don't happen accidentally. Permanent record means that the goal is to create a historical record that is as permanent as possible. The goal of conducting an oral history is so that history can be preserved and its contents can be made available to the public, including researchers, community members, library patrons, etc. The audience for an oral history largely depends on the purpose of the oral history. You might want to conduct an oral history for your family archive, which might not wind up being publicly available, for example. But some of you might want to conduct oral histories that will be available at places like your local history society. At this point, you might be noticing that we're talking a lot about accessibility and community. That's because accessibility is an important component of oral history, and that oral histories have historically been a community-oriented practice. This is in part because of the history of how oral histories themselves were made. So how are oral histories made? In the past, oral histories were passed down generation to generation through storytelling, both in public and private settings. Grandparents told their grandchildren, community leaders told their broader community, etc. Nowadays, when we are interested in preserving an oral history, we usually conduct what's called an oral history interview. An oral history interview is an interview conducted between two or more people. They often have one person who is asking questions and one or more people that are answering. And we're going to go into a lot more detail on what is exactly a part of conducting an oral history interview in the next videos. Through the process of the oral history interview, the words of the person being interviewed are either written down verbatim or recorded and transcribed later. So oral histories are important for a variety of reasons, but I'm going to talk about three here. First, oral histories are different from written histories. There are limitations of written history in whose stories get told. In written history, not everyone's histories are considered part of or worthy of being considered part of the historical record. Oral histories are also different from written history in how they are recorded. Oral histories are recorded through voice rather than through the presentation and interpretation of primary sources, like you might see in a history book. Oral histories are also different because of their mode of communication and their audience. Speaking your thoughts is fundamentally different than writing them, and your perceived audience in writing versus speaking is also different, and both of these things affect oral histories. Next, we need to talk about what an oral history is able to do that a written history isn't. So oral histories originated as a way to document unwritten, often invisible histories. The topics of oral histories are often ignored by traditional history-making processes because they're deemed unimportant or counter to what should be recorded. Oftentimes, oral histories are more accessible because oral histories are told in a language that people more easily understand, and oral histories are often located in more accessible institutions. So to briefly recap what we've covered in this video, first, we talked about what is an oral history. This including answer the question, not only what is it, but also what is the goal, and then how are oral histories made. We'll spend a lot more time in the next couple of videos discussing how oral histories are made and how you can perform them yourself. We also covered why oral histories are important, including how oral histories are different from written history. Before you move on to the next video, I'd like you to take some time to think about the following questions. First, why do you want to conduct an oral history interview? Second, what topics are you interested in? If you're interested in additional resources about oral histories, I recommend checking out the Oral History Association's website, which is located at www.oralhistory.org. They have lots of resources on conducting oral histories, including best principles in practice, which parts of the series are based on. I would also recommend checking out the Michigan Oral History Association, located at www.michiganaoha.org. And of course, while you are here, you should check out Benzonia Public Library's own Remembering Benzie project, whose videos are located on the library's YouTube page. This marks the end of video 1. I look forward to seeing you in video 2. Thank you.